everyone, I'm Vibha Chauhan and welcome to Chauhan classes for next year. So today I will explain Class 9th Geography Chapter 4 and also I could say that the most awaited chapter of our Class 9th SST, and that chapter is Climate. So today our chapter is Climate. Now the last two previous chapters we had discussed about the landforms and the drainage system of our country, and those two are kind of 2 out of 3 basic elements that anyone learns about the natural environment of any particular area. So in this chapter we are going to see the third one, the third basic element of natural environment that anyone sees in a particular area, and that is atmospheric conditions, the climate of the place. So in this chapter basically we are going to discuss about the climatic conditions that exist in India and how the seasons are formed. Have you ever thought that why we wear woolens in the months of December, January and February, and why can't we wear them in the months of May or June, and why is it so rainy in the months of July or August? So we will see the answers of these questions in this chapter. Now first of all, let's clear the differentiation between some terms. Now many of the students get confused between climate and weather. Now there is a difference between climate and weather because those two things aren't same. Many people think that they are same, but they aren't. So let's discuss about their definition. So first is weather. Now weather, we could say that weather is a fluctuation of the atmospheric conditions that changes particularly. You could say that changes eventually. In a day it can change many times. It can change 5 times or 10 times. But overall for a month, for a year, it changes in a pattern. That is, the days are cool or warm, the days are windy or dusty, you could say. The days are cooler or warmer, you could say. So that is a pattern. Now the pattern of weather for more than 25 years is known as the climate of the place. So you have to see the difference between weather and climate, because climate is the atmospheric condition of any place that has been there for more than 25 years. It is a kind of pattern. But weather is a particular, you could say, interior atmospheric conditions that can change by time to time, by hour to hour in a day as well. Now you have seen in your daily life that sometimes it is very sunny and suddenly it becomes rainy. So that is the weather of the day, and the pattern of weather for more than 25 years is known as the climate of the place. So you could say that is the difference between weather and climate, and thus we are going to discuss about the climatic conditions that exist in our country. Now you know what, if we talk about the climatic conditions, then in the world there are different regions. There can be divisions of different climatic regions all over the world. And if we talk particularly specifically about our country, then our country India is a monsoon type. You could say that the climatic type of our country is a monsoon type. Now let's see the origin of this term monsoon. Now monsoon is adopted from the Arab word that is Mausim, and that means the seasons. So you could say that monsoon, that are the reversal winds in our country. So we will discuss about the monsoon climatic conditions in our country, and that is the climatic condition of our country, that is the monsoon system. Monsoon, that are the climatic conditions of our country. So all over we are going to discuss about those things. Now you have seen that is a particular division of our country, of our climatical region, but even in the interior part of our country there can be more and more divisions among the temperature and precipitation, because atmospheric conditions also depend on the precipitation or the temperature, and you have seen the difference between the temperature and precipitation among various parts of our country. Like if we talk about the temperature, now what happens that in summer, what happens that if we look at the temperature of Rajasthan or any arid region of our country, then it would be around 50 degrees Celsius. but at the same time in Jammu and Kashmir it would be around 20 degrees Celsius. So you could see a vast difference, and you could say that in the months of winter, if there is winter season, then what happens that the temperature of Jammu and Kashmir would be minus 45 degrees Celsius. It would decrease to minus 45 degrees Celsius, but at the same time in Rajasthan it will be 20 degrees Celsius or even more than that. It won't go down, it won't decrease in minus. So you could say that is the difference between the temperatures of different places of our country. And if we talk about the precipitation, then it can be as much as 400 centimeter per year in the Meghalaya region of our country, or it can be as short as, you could say, a few as 10 centimeter in the Rajasthan region of our country. So you have to see the vast difference between the temperature and the precipitation of various states, various regions of our country, and that is, you could say that the variations, the divisions among the climatic conditions that exist in India. Now it has been seen that the coastal areas experience less seasonal developments, less seasonal changes in their parts, because they are covered with sea. You could say that they are covered with water, and that's why they have experienced less seasonal changes than in the northern plains. And if we talk about the precipitation, then it decreases from east to west in the northern plains. So you could say that is geographically the climatic conditions of our country. So let's start our chapter with our first topic, that is climatic controls. So first topic is climatic controls. So all over we are going to discuss about climate in this chapter. Now first let us discuss that how the climate is controlled, what are the factors of the climatic conditions, and there are mainly 6 factors that affect the climatic condition existing in India, and those are the latitude, altitude, pressure and winds, the distance from the sea, ocean currents or continentality or relief, you could say. So there are these 6 factors that affect the climatic condition existing in India. Now let's discuss about them in more brief, you could say. Now first is latitude. You know what, that latitude also affects the climatic condition existing in any particular region. And why is it so? Because the sun rays varies from equator latitude. Equator is also latitude and the largest latitude. It varies from the equator to the north poles or the south poles, and that's why the temperature becomes extremes around the north pole or the south pole. If you go further to the, you could say that further to the equator, and that's why the temperature, you could say that there are extreme temperatures. So you could say that latitude also plays a very important role in the climatic conditions, because in different latitudes there would be different amount of sun rays, and that would determine the seasonal change of that particular area. And next is altitude. We have seen that when we go higher in the mountains, the pressure decreases, and that affects the climatic conditions. So you know what, that at height, at altitude, there is a less pressure, and that's why it would affect the climatic conditions. And if we talk about that pressure and winds, you know what, that if the winds are coming with so much pressure about the moist, then they would bring rain as well. So you could say that wind also play, the pressure of winds also play a very important role, because it is because of them what happens in our country, that in any particular area those winds, pressure winds, come from different regions of different parts of the world, and then when they enter any particular area, they will bring a kind of seasonal change because of lot of pressure that they have. So that is you could say that change that is brought by the pressure of winds. Now next is that ocean currents. Now ocean currents, you have seen that those areas that are farther from the ocean ocean water experience more and more seasonal changes. Like for example, the sea in our country. Now the southern part of our country, that are the coastal areas, you have seen that they experience less seasonal changes, and because of the ocean currents. So that happens, a situation is created that is known as the continentality. Now continentality is seen at that areas that are farther from the sea areas, from the sea water, from the ocean water. Continentality in simple term means that days are very hot in summer and the nights are very cold in winter. So that happens at those places, at those areas that are very farther than the ocean water. And there is also very importance of distance from sea. Now you know what, that wind flows from how much distance from sea also depends on the sea. You know what, that it can depend on sea as well to bring in that area about rainwater as well. So it is because of sea then there will be more rain or less rain, and you know that because of sea there is less experience of seasonal changes in the coastal areas of our country. So you could say that distance from sea also matters for the climatic conditions. And lastly, relief features too. You know that about the mountains, the high mountains may act as a barrier for the hot winds or the cold winds, like the Himalayan mountains in our country, and they can even bring rain in our country if they pass through the rain winds. So you could say that relief features also are very important for the climatic conditions, because they can act as a barrier for the hot winds or the cold winds. Like for example, the Himalayan mountains in our country act as a barrier for the cold winds that come from the part of Russia and from those part of Asia, that are the cold winds. And if they weren't Himalayan mountains, then our country would be more and more colder. So you could say that they can act as a barrier for cold winds or for the hot winds. Now these are the climatic factors that affect the climatic condition existing on Earth. Now let us discuss more briefly about some of them that are very important. So let's continue our next topic, that is factors affecting India's climate. So factors affecting India's climate. Now that we have seen about the factors that affect the climatic conditions existing on Earth. Now what are specifically those factors that affect the climatic conditions of India? Let's discuss about them. So basically there are majorly three of them that are: first is latitude. So first is latitude. You know what, the climatic conditions existing in India are because of latitude too. Now you have seen, know very well that Tropic of Cancer passes through India, almost dividing it into two halves. You know that it passes through the western part through Rann of Kutch, the eastern part through Mizoram. So you know that it almost divides our country into two half parts, and the southern part, the part that lies in the southern part of this Tropic of Cancer lies in the tropical region. You know the tropical regions, and in this region the sun rays are straight, you could say. And the part that lies in the northern part of this Tropic of Cancer is lying in the subtropical parts. So you could say that in India it lies in the tropical parts as well as the subtropical parts, and that's why, because it lies in different regions, that's why there have been variation of seasons, of climatic condition, atmospheric conditions in our country. Now Tropic of Cancer, as also know that it passes through 23 degrees 30 minutes, you could say that in our country, almost dividing it into two half parts and playing a very important role for the climatic condition in our country. Now the next factor is altitude. So just as I was discussed about the Himalayan mountains, now there are very high mountains in the northeastern part of our country, and in the coastal areas. You know what, that these mountains, the Himalaya mountains, are of average height of 6,000 meters, and that's why they act as a barrier for the cold winds of the Central Asia that can come in India and can become our country can become very extremely cold. But because they hold as a barrier for those cold winds, and that's why India is experiencing is very milder, you could say, very milder winds. So you could say that for the climatic conditions, these mountains are also playing a very important role, and that's why altitude is important too. Now that is about the Himalaya mountains. There are some mountains in the coastal areas as well, and that bring rain too, because they pass through the rain winds, you could say, that cover moist with them, and that's why there is rain too. So you could say that is about the altitude. Now the next and last factor affecting the India's climate is pressure and winds. Pressure and winds, that is the most important one here. Now there are three things that have been discussed, that have been associated with pressure and winds that affect the climatic condition, atmospheric conditions in our country. Now first is that pressure on the surface. Now you know what, that if we talk about our country, about India, you know that it lies in the northeastern hemisphere, and that's why the high pressure belts of the northern hemisphere come in India, and those winds don't carry any kind of moistures, and that's why they bring no rain or very little rain with them. So you might have been thinking that so that India should have been a very dry country and very arid country, but why is it so rainy in our country? Because India is a unique country with different climatic conditions, and that we have to see in this chapter. So you have to see that is the pressure of the winds that come in our country from the from outer side, we could say, from the northwestern part. Those are the northwesterly winds that enter in our country with very little moisture, but still in India there is a very great rainfall in many parts, and we have to see about it. You know what, that if we talk about our country, then there are high pressure winds in the northern part of the Himalayan mountains, and in winter what happens, that those high pressure winds go to the southern part of our country, to the low pressure winds, Now you have to see what are high pressure winds and the low pressure winds. Now you know that the low pressure is created. Low pressure is created when there are hot winds, there are heat winds, and high pressure is created when there are cold winds. So you have to understand the meaning, the deeper meaning of those things, so that only you can understand this chapter. So you have to see that in winter what happens, that those high pressure winds that lie in the northern part of the Himalaya mountains go to the southern part, to the southern coastal areas, to the southern part where there are low pressures, and they go there to fill the depression. And you could say that is to change the climatic conditions too. And after that, in summer it is extremely opposite. You know that in summer what happens, that from the southern part of our country, you could say that heat pressure winds, or you could say that high pressure winds go through the northern part of our country to the low pressure winds. So you could say that there is a reversal in the situations in summer and winter, and that causes a climatic condition too. Now here is an important role of jet streams as well. Now jet streams, you know that are the narrower belt of high altitudes, an average of 12,000 meters, and there are different types of jet streams, you know that they are named differently. So you could say that there are two jet streams that have played a very important role here, that are northwesterly jet streams, north tropical westerly jet streams, and northeasterly jet streams. Now if we talk about the northwesterly jet streams, what happens then, that when those rivers, you know that these jet streams flow in our country except summer, all throughout the year except summer, and northeasterly jet streams that come from the eastern part of our continent, of the Indian subcontinent, comes through the eastern part, and you could say that flows in the months of summer. So you could say that they also play an important role for the rainfall in our country, because those winds from the southern part of our country was going towards north, and that causes a very great rainfall in the mainland of our country. So you could say that is why there is a rainfall in our country. So you could say that here Himalayas also play an important role, and the winds are the most important. The monsoon winds that come in India, that flow in India, are the great cause for the rainfall in our country, and that's why they have been named. You know that monsoon was named by the Arabs from their language when they came first into India, and they saw the weather of our country, the climate of our country, and that's why they named it like that. So you could say that is upper circulation and the jet streams of our country. You could say that is the important role of the climatic conditions of the pressure and the winds. Now we have seen about that it isn't that there won't be any rainfall in our country, because it has a unique structure of climatic condition in India. Now our next topic is the Indian monsoon. So the Indian monsoon. So just as I've explained that this monsoon name was given by the Arab, well, more specifically the Arab sailors. As all of you know that you have studied in history that the first ones who discovered India were the sailors. So it is obvious when they came in India, they saw the reversal winds that were in India, and thus named it as monsoon winds. Monsoon, that is from Arab origin and has the meaning of Mausim, or in English it is seasons. So you could say that the reversal winds of India, the climatic conditions, the atmospheric conditions of India are known as the monsoon, or more specifically monsoon winds. Now if you have to look at the monsoon of our country, then there are some facts that have to be taken off, that have to be seen, and those facts are: first is that the heating and cooling of land and water. You know that is also one of the most important facts, because comparatively in the sea, around sea, it is very high pressure, but comparatively here is very low pressure. That creates very low pressure on the land mass. Now next is of that the shift of ITCZ, or in full form it would be Intertropical Convergence Zone, that lies around 5 degrees north latitude. And you know what, that this is a zone, this is a trough, you could say, a very broad trough, and that is used, you could say that those winds from the northwestern and from the southern part are merged together, are converged together here. So you could say that this is a zone, and that shifts in the Ganga plains. So you could say that the convergence, the shift of this ITCZ in the Ganga plains is also playing a very important role for the Indian monsoons. Now the third fact is of Tibetan Plateau. Now you know what, that the Tibetan Plateau in summer gets very high, and that's why vertical very hot winds come into the India, and that if it carries moss, then it would bring rainfall too. So you could say that is for affecting the monsoon too. And the next fact is that the high pressure in the east of Madagascar, 20 degrees south of the Indian Ocean, and the position, you know that the position and intensity of this point is very high. So you could say that is about that. Now and there is another concept that we have already discussed about the jet streams. Now as all of you know that the northwesterly jet streams that are in our country, that lie in the northern part, the north of Himalayas, and the tropical easterly jet streams that lie in the southern part, the southern peninsula of our country in the summer. So you could say that these are some of the facts that affect the Indian monsoon. Well, apart from them, there are some uncertain facts too. Now you know what, normally what happens happens that in the tropical eastern South Pacific Ocean there is a very high pressure compared to that of Indian Ocean. But in some certain years, what happens that high pressure of Pacific Ocean is comparatively low than compared to that of Indian Ocean, and that is known as the South Oscillation or SO. Now you know what, that this SO also affects the Indian monsoon because the high pressure becomes greater than that of Pacific Ocean. And if we talk about it, then to compute that, you know that from 2 points of Pacific Ocean and from Indian Ocean, 2 points are selected and they are computed to predict the intensity of high pressure. So from Pacific Ocean, the point is Tahiti, and from the Indian Ocean, the point is Darwin. So from these 2 points, if it is around zero, if it is an average or equal, you could say, or a negative, then that means that the high pressure, you could say, that is not an average, is not equal, you could say, is not well, because the high pressure of Pacific Ocean would be low than that of Indian Ocean, and that's why they are computed together to predict the intensity. And when that happens, when they are in negative or around zero, then what happens that then comes the concept of El Nino. Now, El Nino is a warm current flowing towards the Peruvian coast instead of Peruvian colder warms, instead of Peruvian coast colder currents. Now, it happens between 2 to 5 years, every 2 to 5 years, and El Nino, as you could say, that is just a warm current. Now, if we talk about that, if we talk about the SO, if we talk about the southern oscillation, then it is connected to El Nino as well, and that's why this whole system is known as ENSO, that is El Nino Southern Oscillation. And if we talk more briefly about El Nino, then its origin is from a Spanish word, and in Spanish you could say that El Nino means baby Christ, because this warm current flows from the starting of Christmas, and that's why it has been named so. So you could say that instead of the colder currents, it flows in some of the years, in some uncertain years. Now that we have discussed about the Indian monsoon, now you know what, that the monsoons are experienced all through the world in Asia from 20° north to 20° south. In that area only monsoons are experienced. So you could say that our India also lies in the monsoon region, and that is about some of the facts of the Indian monsoon. Now our next topic is the onset of the monsoon and withdrawal. So the onset of the monsoon and the withdrawal. Now that we have seen about the facts that affect the Indian monsoon, now we have to see its onset and when it withdraws from our country. Now you know what, that you could say that unlike the trade winds, they are very pulsating. They are not very steady winds. You know that trade winds that are the northwestern trade winds that also can come in India. So they are very steady. But these monsoon winds are not steady. They are more and more pulsating and are affected by too much atmospheric conditions. And if we talk about its duration in our country, then the duration of the monsoon winds in our country is about 100 days to 120 days, and it starts from the early June to mid-September in our country. It lasts from the early June to mid-September in our country. So let's discuss about the onset of the monsoon and then the withdrawal of the monsoon. Monsoon winds more specifically, because monsoon winds come in India, flow in India, and that's why monsoon is experienced. So we would say monsoon winds. Now they came in India from the southern tip of our peninsula. So you could say that by the early June, by the first week of June, they come to the southern tip of our country, to the southern tip of the peninsula. And then they are divided into two branches. First one is Arabian branch, Arabian Sea branch, and the next one is Bay of Bengal branch. Now first is Arabian Sea branch. Now by the 10th of the June, it reaches to the Maharashtra, it reaches to the Mumbai region. You could say Mumbai, that is also coastal area. So it reaches there, and by the first week of June too, you know what, that the onset of the monsoon is very rapid, and that's why a lot of rainfall is brought by these winds. So you could say that because of monsoon winds, when they come in India, there is a very burst of rainfall, and that can easily be distinguished from the pre-showers of monsoon. Now, as all of you know that before monsoon came, you know what, that there is a pre-shower, a little bit rainfall, not rainfall that much, but a little rain of pre-showers, you could say. But when the monsoon winds come in India, there is a kind of burst, you could say burst of the rainfall in our country. There are floods as well that have been caused that damage the life or the property. So you could say that there are two branches that have been divided. One is Arabian Sea branch and next is Bay of Bengal branch. Now by the 10th of June they reach, you could say that the Arabian Sea branch reaches the Maharashtra region or the Mumbai region, and this branch reaches the Assam region. That is a very lofty region. You could say there are Brahmaputra plains as well. That are kind of systems, very massive swampy regions. And after that it reaches, you know that from there, from the Bay of Bengal branch, it is converged. It is diverged towards the western part of our country. You could say that towards the Ganga plain, and thus it goes towards the Ganga plain. And by the mid-June, this Arabian Sea branch reaches the Gujarat region, the Saurashtra Kutch region, you could say, of Gujarat. And after that, in the northwestern part of Ganga plain, these two branches, that are the Arabian Sea branch and the Bay of Bengal branch, are submerged together. And after that, around the 29th of June, the Delhi, you know that Delhi, that is the capital of our country and union territory as well. So this region, Delhi region and the NCERT regions will experience the monsoons. You know that by that time, the western Uttar Pradesh, the parts of Haryana, the eastern Rajasthan will experience the monsoons. And after that, by the mid-July, all the other remaining parts of our country will experience monsoon. So you could say that is the structure of the monsoons. But from the southern tip of our country, it divides into two parts, and after that it submerges at the northwestern of the Ganga plains, and thus monsoons are, you could say, that experienced from all the parts of our country. Now that is the onset of the monsoons in our country. Now what about the withdrawal? Now if we talk about the withdrawal, then the withdrawal process of the monsoon is very gradual process. They withdraw very gradually and very slowly, you could say. Now their withdrawal process starts by the, you could say that early October or the late September, and it lasts towards the December or January. Now if we talk about the withdrawal, then what happens that from the northwestern states, northwestern part of our country, it starts to withdraw, and by the, you could say that by the mid-September, it has already discovered, you could say that it has already withdrawn the half of the northern part. You could say that the half part of our country, that is the northern part of our country. And after that, the withdrawal of the monsoon winds takes very place rapidly. You could say that in the northern part of the country, the withdrawal is very gradual, but in the southern part, it is very rapid. And that is about the withdrawal, about the monsoon winds. Now you know what, that in the December they withdraw completely from our country, and at that time our country is already influenced by the winter monsoons, and that is about the mainland of our country. What about the islands like Andaman and Nicobar Islands or the Lakshadweep Islands? Well, if we talk about them, they experience monsoons, the pre-showers from south to north, from the last April, you could say the last week of April to the first week of May. Now if we talk about the withdrawal of the monsoon winds in these islands, then it takes place from the first week of December to the first week of January. So you could say that is about the mainland and about the islands, about the onset of the monsoon and the withdrawal of the monsoon. Now we have seen the factors that affect the inland monsoons and the onset, the structure of the monsoons, how they are created, how they time in our country. Now our next topic is the seasons. So the seasons. Now that we have seen about the monsoon climatic conditions of our country. Now as all of you know that there are different seasons in our country and you are familiar with the season that the place you live in. Now as all of you know that in the coastal areas there is less experience of seasonal changes due to the effect of the sea, due to the effect of the sea water. But in the northern part of India there are seasons that can change. You could say that in a year they can change accordingly. Now you can say that we can divide seasons. There are 4 seasons particularly specifically that are the main seasons, officially the main seasons of our country. Now first is the hot weather season, next is cold weather season, then advancing monsoon, and then the retreating or post monsoons. Now let's discuss them one by one. So first is the cold weather season or the winter. So the cold weather season, as all of you know that winter season that you love to play in. Now this cold weather season, if we talk about it, that it starts from the mid-November to the February, you could say. It starts from the mid-November to the last week of the February, and the coldest months into this winter are the December and January. As all of you know that in winter you need to wear woolen clothes, that we had started in the starting of this chapter, introduction of this chapter. Now you have seen that due to the atmospheric conditions, seasons are created due to this apparent movement of sun too, because sun plays a very important role in the seasonal changes in our country. So you could say that that's why you have to wear woolen clothes in the winter month or the cold weather season. Now particularly in the cold weather season, the temperature of the particular region decreases very rapidly. Now as all of you could say that in the Jammu and Kashmir, in the region of Jammu and Kashmir, in the months of January or February, it even goes to -45 degrees, -30 degrees Celsius. And you could say that, but in the coastal areas there isn't that much of difference. Like for example, if we talk about the early winters, early cold weather season, then around the Kerala region of our country it is about 25 degrees Celsius. From 24 to 25 degrees Celsius the temperature is. But if we talk about the northern plains of our country, then it is about 10 degrees Celsius. So you could say that there is a vast difference in the seasonal experience of different areas as well. And in the cold weather seasons the days are warm and the nights are very cold. So you could say that that is the structure of winter. Now if we talk about the winter, then there is no humidity, around no humidity and you could say that very low humidity in winters, very low temperature, and it is a kind of very feeble change, you could say, a very feeble season, you could say. And you know what, that due to the trade winds that come from the northeastern part from our country, that prevail in our country into the months of winter, into the season of winter, also bring a very little rain. So you could say that in the months of winter there is a very little rain or around no rain, but that little amount of rain that is commonly known as Mahavat is very important for the rabi crops. Rabi crops are the crops that are grown around the months of winter. So you could say that that is the structure of the cold weather season. Now these cold weather season last from the mid-November to the February and are very cold. You could say the temperature decreases very rapidly. So you could say that that is about the cold weather season. Now our next season is the hot weather season or the summer. So the hot weather season, that is also known as summer. Now after winter, from March to May, there are summer seasons or the hot weather seasons. Now due to the apparent movement, due to the shift of sun towards the northwards, the summer are created. The hot weather season is created, you could say, in the northern part of our country too. Now you know that the peninsula part of our country isn't that much of change. That's why we are only talking about the middle part of our country or the northeastern part of our country. So let's discuss about this hot weather season. Now, if we talk about the hot weather season, then there is high humidity as well as high temperatures. Now, if you're gonna look about the temperatures, then from March to May, there is a very vast difference among the temperatures too. Now, in the month of March, the highest record of the temperature that has been recorded in India is about of 38 degrees Celsius in the Deccan Plateau, and after that, in the month of April, it is about 42 degrees Celsius, and after that, in the month of May, it is about 45 degrees Celsius in the region of Madhya Pradesh. So you could say that from month to month, the temperature rises very rapidly in the months of summer, and in the month of summer, in the hot weather season, there is a kind of very low pressure. The very low pressure, because the heat winds generate very rapidly. So you could say that there is very low air pressure. There is almost no air pressure, and you could say that a striking feature of the hot weather season is a low. Now, low is a kind of dusty, gusty wind that you could say that very dry, gusty, dusty wind that flows in the northern part of our country. Now, these low can prove to be fatal as well. You could say that direct exposure to these low may be proved as fatal as well. So you have to be careful about them. Now, these low are a kind of wind that flow in the northern part of country, and they can last for the nights as well. As all of you know that they will last in the that afternoon or in the morning, in the days, but they can even last for the nights as well. So that is a very striking feature of the summer. And in West Bengal, these low pressure winds are known as Kal Baisakhi. So you could say that is about the summer. You know that in the summer, in the month of summer, in the hot weather season, a very elongated low air pressure winds flows from Thar deserts to the Chota Nagpur plateau. So you could say that is a feature of the hot weather season. Now you have to see that the temperature in the arid regions of our country, that is the Thar deserts, their temperature can go as high as 50 degrees Celsius in the days too. So you could say that is about the summer. And after that, you know that striking feature that we have discussed low. Now thunderstorms are also very common in the northwestern part of our country. A thunderstorm where the violent wind come together with dust and sand with them. So you could say that is about the thunderstorm. But sometimes what happens that there are precautions, there are predictions, anticipations of a very little bridge as well, little breeze you could say, and that brings some kind of soothingness among the people, kind of relaxedness, about kind of relaxed feeling among the people you could say, because in this hot weather season people would just a kind of feeling of boiling and down. So you could say that in summer sometimes there is a very pre-shower of the monsoon, and thus you could say that it brings very kind of very relaxing breeze, a relaxing cool breeze in the nights. So that is about the summer. And when the summer are about to end, then come the pre-showers of the monsoon, and especially in the region of Karnataka and Kerala states of our country. And these you could say that these showers are also known as the mango showers, because of these showers the ripening of mango is done. So you could say that the sweet mangoes that we eat can be ripened off because of these pre-showers of monsoon. So that is about the structure of the hot weather season, that is summer, and the cold weather season, that is winter. Now next season that we are going to discuss is advancing monsoon or the rainy season. So the advancing monsoon or the rainy season in the common language. Now as we had seen about the hot weather season, that is summer, and by the early June in the northern plain the low pressure winds intensifies. You know what that in the month of June the condition intensifies of hot, you could say that of low pressure in the northern plains, and that's why it attracts the trade winds winds from the southern part, from the southern part of the Indian Ocean, and that's why those winds start to flow into India from the southern part of our country. So it starts, that it flows towards the southwesterly and then enters in India in the southern tip, and when it comes into India, it brings a lot of moisture, and that's why it has brought a lot of rainfall in our country too. That if we talk about only Western Ghats in the southern part of our country, it receives 250 centimeters of rainfall because of these winds, because of these monsoon winds. You could say because of these south monsoon winds. And all over, in a month, all over country, with an extreme exception of the northwestern states, almost all over the country it covers. There is an experience of monsoons almost all over the country in a month, except the northwestern states, and after that it goes to northwestern part as well, but a very little. As a whole, you could say that in the northeastern part of our country, in the northeastern states of our country, there is a very high rainfall because of these winds. You could say that in Meghalaya there is a region that is known as the Monsoon Ram, and that region is the highest, is of the highest average rainfall in the world. So you could say that is a reason where the average rainfall is the highest all over the world. So you could say that there is a very high rainfall, and that's why you have also seen in the news that in the northeastern part there is a little bit flood that has been caused, that damaging the life and property. So you could say that is the advancing monsoon or the rainy season. Well, it brings a kind of lot of rain to our country that helps for agriculture too, and thus leading to economy as well, and it fertiles the soil too. But you could say that disadvantages of these winds too. Well, if we talk about the rainy season or the advancing monsoons, the striking feature of these winds is the breaks. That there isn't any kind of consistency among these winds. What happens actually is that for some days there would be very intense rainwater, there would be very intense rainfall, but after that there would be dry spells. So you could say that there are so much breaks between these winds, and that's why there isn't that much consistency, and it is because of the axis. So you could say that because of the axis and the trough. What happens that when the axis is at the plains, there will be very great rainfall, but when the axis of the trough is at the Himalayan mountains, then what would happen that there won't be any kind of rain on the plains, on the northern plains, and that's what will lead a kind of dry spells in those areas. But in the mountainous regions, in those mountains there would be heavy rainfall, and because there are many rivers, it would cause to floods as well. It damages property and life too much. So you could say that because of the axis and trough, it is a connection between them that leads to dry spells and a kind of inconsistency in the rainfall because of the advancing monsoons. So you could say that it is also a feature of this advancing monsoon. Well, if you are talking about the advancing monsoon, then we have seen that there are dry spells, and because there isn't any kind of prediction, there can't be any kind of anticipation of the tendency. That because there isn't any kind of prediction, there can't be any kind of prediction of the tendency, of the consistency of these advancing monsoon, and that's why in some parts of the region, in some parts of the monsoon winds, there are very droughts, there are very dry regions, and in some parts there are a kind of flood region. So in both parts there are natural calamities, there is a drought and there is a flood, and that leads to a very great loss in agriculture too, because farmers aren't sure what they have to do. They can't predict this by looking at the sky that there would be rain or not. So you could say that a million of people got affected because of the you could say that breaks in these, because of the tendency of breaks of these advancing monsoon, and that's why the agriculture, the farmers of our country have have a great loss in it. You could say that it have a great loss in it. And we were talking about the northwestern states. Well, in the states of Rajasthan and Gujarat, there isn't a very kind of big rainfall. There is always a very scanty rainfall because those regions are the semi-arid, the arid regions of our country, and that's why there isn't that much rainfall compared to the other parts of the country. And if we're talking about those parts that have a great rainfall, then it would be the northwest eastern parts of our country, those areas where there are 7 sisters. You have studied about the 7 sisters or the 7 states in that part. So there is a great, you could say, rainfall in that part of our country, and in the southern part as well. You could say that because of that rainfall, there is a great humidity in the southern part of our country too. And after that, you could say that that is a kind of advancing monsoon or the rainy season that occurs in India by the early June, when the situation intensifies in the northern plains. Now, next to last season that can be divided is retreating or post-monsoons, the transition season. So the retreating or the post-monsoons that are also known as the transition season. So it is the retreating or the post-monsoons that is also known as the transition season. Now what happens actually that in the months of around October, in the months of October and November, what happens that the apparent movement of sun goes towards the south. You could say the south of the earth, and that's why these winds, these monsoon winds that were advancing in India were also going towards south. So you could say that it will also start to withdraw our country. So you could say that that is the process when there is a retreating process of the monsoon winds, and that's why you could say that this season also known as the retreating monsoon season or the transition season. Now in this season, what happens that the days are very hot, very warm, and the nights are very cool and pleasant. So you could say that a very good temperature, a very good season for you, because days are very hot and the nights are very pleasant, you could say, very smooth or relaxing, you could say. And after that, that is about the first half of the October, and that is also known as the October heat. And after that, in the second half of the October, what happens that there would be a very great decrease in the temperature, and that would lead to kind of dry winter seasons, because after that in November there would be the cold weather seasons. So you could say that in this season, in the first half of the October, there would be October heat, and in the second half of the October, there will be a kind of dry winter season. So hot rainy days and the dry winter season, it will become a kind of like that. And the high pressure winds of the northwestern part of our country are shifted towards the Bay of Bengal, towards that part that is the Bay of Bengal part, and it is generally because of the western cyclonic depressions, western cyclonic disturbances, you could say. And that, you know what, that in the northeastern part of our country, in the part of northeastern states, even in the part of Orissa or Andhra Pradesh, there are you could say that there are even cases of the cyclones. There are struck out the cyclones, and that's why there is a very great damage of life and property. You might have heard in the news that the cyclones have occurred in Orissa, the region of Andhra Pradesh, or in the region of northeastern part of our country. So that you could say that because of that cyclonic disturbances, you could say that there was a great loss among the people. People have to shift down from here and there. People have to migrate from those places to another place, and the loss to vegetation, natural vegetation and wildlife as well. So that is about the retreating season or the transition season. Now in this season, these are very pleasant nights and very cool, hot days, you could say, and that lasts for a very good, you could say that for a very few months, for a very few time, for a very few days, because after that the cold weather season or the winter seasons will start after November. So that is about the transition season. Now our next topic is distribution of rainfall. So distribution of rainfall. Now we have seen about the seasons, we have seen about the monsoon. Now let's discuss about the distribution of rainfall. Now if I ask a question, is there an equal distribution of rainfall? The answer is obvious, because there isn't any kind of equal distribution of rainfall in our country. Now look at the northeastern states. In Meghalaya, in Assam, in the region of Mizoram, there is a very high rainfall, as much as high as 400 centimeters annually, and even in the southern part, in the western Ghats, it is as much as 400 centimeters annually. But what about the western parts of our country? What about the Rajasthan or the adjoining parts of Punjab, Haryana and Gujarat? There is as less as 60 centimeters annually. So you could say that there is a very great difference, there is a very unequal distribution of rainfall all over the country, and it is you could say that it is because of the latitudinal difference, and you could say that it is because of the location of our country. Compared to the other parts in the same latitude, India is still better. India is still a step forward than other countries. So you could say that there is an unequal distribution of rainfall all over the country. Like for example, if we talk about the Himalayan mountains, there is a restricted for the snowfall or the hailing. So you could say that in the Himalayan mountains, in the cold weather season, there is a very great snowfall, and in sometimes there is a case of avalanche as well. So you could say that is about the distribution of rainfall. Then we have talked about the northeastern part, about those 7 sister states. We have talked about the western Ghats or the western states, you could say. But what about the rest of the states? Well, the rest of the states do receive rainfall in an average amount. So you could say that all other states receive a kind of average amount that is okay for them, you could say. But for whole country, you could say that there is an unequal distribution of rainfall. So that is about the distribution of rainfall, as much as high as 400 centimeters and can be as less as 10 centimeters annually. Well, we have talked about the region that is Basa and Rang in the Meghalaya state of our country, that is the highest average rainfall of the world. So that is about it. Now the next and last topic of this chapter is monsoon as a unifying bond. So monsoon as a unifying bond. Now the whole chapter we have discussed about monsoon. Now we have seen that there can be unequal distribution of rainfall, there can be damages to life and property, but nevertheless, if we talk about the monsoon, then it is still good for our country. Well, we have to see that because of the monsoon, which there is a kind of cycle of seasons that continues, and because of the apparent movement of the sun, where the kind of cycle of season goes on in our country. And if we talk about the latitudinal part, if we talk about the Jammu and Kashmir, you know what, that part is covered by the Himalayan mountains. If it hadn't acted as the barrier, then what would have happened? It would have become very cold. So in that latitude, compared to other countries, our other countries' part, it is still better, you could say. It is still very good, you could say. So you could say that monsoons have their own disadvantages, but overall, nevertheless, all over the country, from north to south, from east to west, every person awaits for the monsoon. Monsoon brings good rainfall for them, even a little, but it is still a rainfall. It brings a very great kind of rainfall for the agriculture farmers, for their crops to be grown, and thus leading to a kind of agriculture production in our country too. So you could say that all over, monsoon is still very good for our country. We have seen that different relief features in this chapter. We have seen different factors affecting the climatic conditions in India. We have seen that about the seasons, about the cold weather season, where you could say that there are very low temperatures, low humidity, and you could say that a kind of that time of very cold temperature. We have discussed about the hot weather season, we have discussed about the advancing monsoon or the rainy season, and we have also discussed the transition season, and all over we have seen about the western disturbances as well, western cyclonic disturbances as well. So that's all we have discussed in this chapter. Well, we have discussed about the climate of our country. Now that we have discussed about the landmass in the previous chapter and about the drainage system, and in this chapter we have discussed about the climate, and thus it becomes a complete part of the natural environment of any particular area. So that is all we have discussed on in this chapter. I've discussed all topics and subtopics, and the remaining 2 chapters of this book will be covered in the further upcoming videos. So thank you very much.